I'm really excited to introduce our poetic opener for this evening, and welcome Zoom folks. Hello. Hey, so, and before I start, just a quick note to both of our readers, if you have any visual aids, please describe them for those in the audience who might not be sighted, in our Zoom audience as well. Okay. Kim Dhillon writes poetry, art theory and criticism, essays and fiction, and teaches writing to visual artists. She lives on the Saanich Peninsula. Welcome, Kim. Okay. Hello. Okay. I'm tall, so I just have to make this go up a little. Is that okay? Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Christine. All right. Hello. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Russell Books. Thank you, George. I shall try and not be intimidated and not clear the room here. Okay. So I'm currently writing a strange book about the painter Agnes Martin. And Canada Council was nice enough to give me a grant for it, but I don't know if it's going to be like poetry or hybrid or something in between. But what I'm reading tonight is sort of some poems that are maybe research as art history or poetry in process that'll make shape in the final book. I don't know, but we'll see how it goes. So yeah, these are all kind of inspired by this project on the painter Agnes Martin. And there's a big visual arts contingent in the back corner who I'm intimidated by at the moment. All right, but they might get the references in this first one. This is called Not Art History, after Anne Boyer. When I'm not doing art history, I'm not sitting in a white dress on a wooden stage as a pair of scissors given to the audience cuts away my clothes. I'm not writing text on the wall that states the measurements of the room in which the wall stands, or having a gun fired into my arm while recording it on camera. I'm not lying under the wooden floor of a gallery masturbating, and I am also not following passersby walking down the street and then recording their movements. I'm not burning all my paintings. I am not painting ever again. When I'm not doing art history, I'm not staring into the eyes of a stranger opposite me in a chair and holding their gaze until they cry or leave or look away. I'm not pissing in the snow and taking casts of the resulting negative shapes, phallic fountains frozen. When I'm not doing art history, I'm not sifting through boxes on Canal Street, looking for materials in washers and pipes and cords and breathing in their polymers. And I'm not driving my tire through ink and then over white paper. And I'm not listening to the sounds of the room. When I'm not doing art history, I'm not partially burying a woodshed. I'm not sending emails and creating grading rubrics and marking essays and applying for postdocs and underlining the artist's misspelled name or the artist's first name if they are a woman and writing in the comments to not overly familiarize the female artist. I'm not being rejected for grants and I'm not getting grants and then having to write the art history. I am not late to pick up my children. I am not erasing a drawing by a more famous artist for weeks, and I'm not scrawling Virgil's names into my canvas, and I'm not chewing up the pages of Clement Greenberg's writing and spitting the pulp into a vial. When I am not doing art history, I am not waiting for inspiration. I am not the artist who came before and the artist who will come after, and the gaps between what is written and what is left unsaid over and over and over. And so in this Agnes Martin project, a lot of what I'm doing is, at least what I started doing was ekphrastic poetry. Writing about a description of a visual artwork. So this is called ekphrasis 2. Yellow was also not green, you'd agree. A daffodil was not blood, a tangerine, not ocean. But are you seeing the chlorophyll juice of a leaf in the sun, the moss on a rock with its limey complexion, the verdant pigment of my pencil crayon? Or are you seeing something else and just agreeing that yes, that is not this or that? And then I've been writing some tankas, playing around with kind of more specific facts grounded in Agnes Martin's life and her process. And her life is super complicated and super interesting. So these are two little tankas. One to do with her studio in New Mexico, and one to do with swimming, which she did at a very high level as a youth. Tanka number 1. Cradling, waiting. Inspiration will come, the rocker's sturdy, back and forth until you rise from the cold adobe floor. Tanka number 3. Man-made rectangles of deep blue water, bodies cutting through, your line still holds within its strokes, water, body, breath, and page. So a really recurrent theme in Martin's life is water. It occurs a lot in her painting titles, but it occurs also in her life. She grew up most of her sort of adolescence in Vancouver. She trained as a swimmer to an extremely high level, nearly qualifying for the Olympics. She lived on Coenties Slip in New York, where she would say the sailboats were so close that she could sort of reach out and touch the sails from her loft window. And in a period in her life when she left New York and stopped painting for a number of years and moved to New Mexico, she had this assistant, and she at one point asked him to go on a road trip with her to the Northwest Territories and traverse the Mackenzie River in a boat totally ill-suited for this purpose. And so this is a persona poem written from the point of view, which I think maybe persona poems have kind of gone out of favor, but he's, the assistant is a white American straight man, so I kind of feel he's fair game. So this is to Agnes at the mouth of the Mackenzie River, May 1978. You've led me here to captain your boat through flows of ice not yet fully thawed, even though it's late spring. And so we set this 14-foot flat bottom, broad, 2 outboard motor jerry can rig entirely unfit for the job out on the Mackenzie River. You offer no guidance, and so I bring only a warm jacket, down sleeping bag, and a single change of clothes. Sleeping on the ground in Walsenburg, Colorado, you make pancakes, bacon, and coffee, smiling in the mothering. It was the last hot shower I took. Traversing the Mackenzie River is a way of demonstrating to yourself that you do not cling to life, nor do you hold on to anything, you say. I have attached myself to creative persons in my life, seeking basic truths of the human condition, and you are not the last. I brought a small notebook to carry. Emerging giddy from 400 miles a day, you come out with pronouncements like, life moves on, to fixate is to stagnate. I write it down diligently, though I don't know what it means. Your fur-lined gray cap tight over your ears, top flipped up, eyes squinting and wrinkled from the sun, you look into the wind. With your shoulders up, a thick blue parka encloses your body like a blanket and encases you whole, save for your face. I check the steering on the motors, not turned for years, and the dangers of these waters you either choose not to see or do not care. Caught between fear of your irrational responses and the responsibility for our survival, I settle on a false bravado. Your incessant chatter finally stops on the water you dreamed of traveling since you were a child. Some ways after Fort Simpson, I lose track of time. It never gets dark, and you announce we have traveled far enough to turn back just as I get comfortable on the river. Back in Wood Buffalo with the camping tourists, I looked up at Venus and Jupiter, and you scolded, you won't find any answers out there. How long, Zoe? One more?
Yeah, one more is good.
Okay. So another complexity in Martin's life that is often skimmed over in our historical writing is her experience with mental illness throughout her life, particularly paranoid schizophrenia. And often it was her psychotic episodes were triggered by music, which sent her into what she would call a trance, and then was sort of later described as catatonia. And one of these happened when she was walking past a church and overheard a few notes of Bach's Passions. And there's a sort of semi-medical name for this, which is Stendhal syndrome, which is the title of this poem. Stendhal syndrome. Usually it happens in Florence. A recent case, a visitor to the Uffizi Gallery has a heart attack while contemplating Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. Overcome by its presence, his heart stopped. He survived. Can too much beauty make you sick? Maybe it's the occult, the dark magic of David's eye, watching over the city. Maybe it's the long queues. In New York, she stands outside a church on 2nd Avenue, the first few notes of Bach's Passions play, and she is struck, stunned, numb, and left unspeaking, the passions silencing voices until nothing is left. I think, should I stop there?
Yeah, you're just a little past 8 minutes. So that's
Okay, I'll just stop there. I was told 8 minutes and I'm usually a very fastidious timekeeper, so I will stop there. And I'll say I have a book for sale, so I have to like do this thing. So this is more like traditional art criticism, art theory, except like my publisher wanted to be more traditional and they kept saying, Kim, this is creative nonfiction, like stop it. So it's not poetry, it's art criticism, and it retails for like $42 or something on Amazon, but I'll flog it for $20 tonight. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kim. That was fabulous. What a fascinating project. I look forward to hearing and or reading more from you. Okay, so next up we have our featured reader, George Elliott Clarke, here from all the way from Ontario. So happy to have you here. And okay, so George, let's do this right here. Acclaimed for his narrative lyric suites. I'm not trying to pronounce this. / lyric coloring books, poems, opera, libretti, and plays. George Elliott Clarke is a native Africadian and Canada's 7th Parliamentary Poet Laureate. With Canticles, he presents us with a work that views history as a web of imperialism, enslavement, and insurrection. And I think I'll just let George's poetry speak for itself. Come on up, George. Welcome.
Marvelous. It's so good to be here. And I just want to say a big Haligonian thanks as well to my hosts who have been so gracious and kind to me and putting me up at their wonderful home in Saanich. And of course, I am referring to the fabulous Roger and Janet Doyle, great intellectuals, librarians, and movers and shakers of all kinds of discourse. And so we've had a wonderful time talking and dining, and it's so good to see you both after not too long, and to see other Nova Scotians here. So that's marvelous. I want to thank Zoe. I want to thank Planet Earth Poetry for inviting me here. And this has been a project that's been underway since last summer, actually, and here we're here. I've made it. We're all here. This is wonderful, and I've loved everything I've heard tonight. And wow, this is absolutely perfect. So I'll just I'm going to get started reading. I know I've got 20 minutes, and I will try also to be fastidious about the clock. I will mention I won't be reading from this, but I will mention I have a few copies of this memoir, which is now in paperback, and it is called "Where Beauty Survived." And it's about growing up Black in Nova Scotia. The publisher, Knopf Canada, now it's in Vintage Canada as paperback. Were very clear they wanted me to focus on the first 20 years of my life. So that's what I try to do, although there are some other aspects of my life that I look at. So, of course, along the way, I'm talking about the history of the Black community in Nova Scotia, which, as probably all of you know, goes back to the very beginnings of the Black presence in Canada, the 1605. And in terms of actual numbers of people in the thousands in Nova Scotia, we're talking the arrival of the Black Loyalists, 1783, the Black refugees from the War of 1812, where my matrilineal roots partly go back to that period, 1813. In fact, I still own land in Nova Scotia, 3/4 of an acre in the historical Black community of 3 Mile Plains. So I like to say those are my crab apple trees. Those are my anthills. And again, going back to 1813. And of course, there were also those who arrived as slaves in colonial Nova Scotia, brought by Yankees, who came up to take up the land of the kicked out Acadians in 1760 and brought hundreds of African American slaves to Nova Scotia. So Nova Scotia began as a slaveholding colony. For those of you who sometimes wonder, well, why do race relations in Nova Scotia sound so much like Mississippi and Georgia? Well, it's because people from Mississippi and Georgia settled there. We try to cover it up by pretending everybody's Scottish, but that's not true. It's the mainland was settled by Yanks, for crying out loud. The Scots went to Cape Breton in northeastern Nova Scotia. One last thing before I get into the reading. In 2010, you may have heard or may remember the story of Ku Klux Klan style cross set on fire on the lawn of an interracial couple in Hants County, Nova Scotia. This is 2010. And CBC Halifax called me in Toronto to find out, well, where are the Black people from in Hants County? And so I explained. And so then the producer began to say, oh, thank you so much. And it was clear he was going to hang up. I said, but you didn't ask me where the white people are from. And they're the ones who are setting the cross on fire. So in asking that question, finally became clear to me that I myself have been a victim of the propaganda that Nova Scotia is just simply New Scotland. No, it's also New Mississippi and New Georgia and New Virginia. Anyway, so this epic poem, anyway, to finish with the memoir, it's also $20, so I'm flogging that. It's got a couple copies of that. But this epic poem, this is now the 5th volume of a projected 6. I've already written over 2,000 pages of poetry. And ultimately, it's about the creation of the African Baptist Association, Nova Scotia. I need you to understand that this association of churches was put together by ex-slaves who made their way to Nova Scotia and organized in the face of white opposition, white Baptist opposition to be precise, their own church. And the really bizarre thing is the white Baptists did not want the Black Baptists to worship alongside them, wanted to segregate them in their church. But when the Black Baptists said, fine, we'll have our own church, the white Baptists were against it. But it didn't matter because a charismatic ex-slave by the name of Richard Preston went to London and got himself ordained as a minister by the West London Baptist Association, which was the most powerful Baptist association in the world. So when Richard Preston, this Black ex-slave from Virginia, came back to Nova Scotia, 1832, to found the first church of the African Baptist Association, he had more credentials as a Baptist minister than anybody else in Atlantic Canada or colonial Atlantic Canada, anybody. And went about founding something like 24 congregations over 20 years before proclaiming the existence of the African United Baptist Association, Granville Mountain, 1853. 1853. I finally joined the church as of being a very bad Christian. I admit it, I am a very bad Christian. So don't worry, I'm not going to try to convert you, because if I converted you, you just become as bad as me. That's yeah. So I confessed my sins, accepted Jesus as my Savior in 2019. What a neat trick that would be in terms of time travel. But because of the pandemic, I haven't really been able to get back to Nova Scotia very much. And so my baptism keeps getting postponed. Darn. Maybe I should say damn, but no, I better not say that. But I'm looking forward finally, I hope April 9th, Easter, April 9th, I might finally be able to take the waters, as we say, and find myself finally, truly delivered. So, okay, on to the poems, which again deal with history. The way I started this project in 2008, and as I say, this is the 5th volume. So the first 2 volumes deal primarily with history, 2,000 years of oppression, imperialism, racism, slavery, and so on. And it involves actual historical characters as well as fictitious characters. The next 2 volumes, Canticles 2 and 2 volumes, deals with scripture, rewritten scriptures that I rewrote, primarily Judeo-Christian, but also I took a stab at the Book of Mormon, and yeah, it may as well, and that was very fascinating. So that was 2 volumes, and now this is the first volume of 2 that looks specifically at the founding of the African Baptist Church, except to avoid being condemned for blasphemy, I call it the Africadian Baptist Church. So I hope that fig leaf will be sufficient to prevent me from being drummed out of the church I have just managed to join. So I think that they'll be okay ultimately with this. So we're to start with history, a sketch of the life of Reverend Richard Preston, D.D., Doctor of Divinity, and The recent transit through Washington, D.C., 1816. The recent transit through Washington, D.C., 1816. Everybody's a fugitive in that city. So clanging be the alarms, clamor of sirens, chimes with cops eyeing sharpshooters on roofs. Constant loom, threats bullseyeing the president. Nervous city, galling city, white marble sluicing blood. Editorials holler, war versus England or Spain. Either targets sport for profiteering. Pages imprinted can be like mud, down sucking each forward plod. Cloudy is the tap water. Malaria rises, insurgent out the miasma, that's the Potomac. Congress, so many bow-tied mannequins lying straight out their lungs. An injurious winter freezes their postures, prostrate, supine, crucified. Look at Washington, a king minus a crown, was an inhuman monarch, odious as the crowned skulls of Europe. I seen the white derelicts licking caviar out of dumpsters, the pig-faced whores, civil as doubles, the homeless waifs, bidding down on cardboard, the homeless waifs, bidding down on cardboard outside the burnt shell of the Brit-torched Congress. Gunshots outnumber flu shots, Natch. Guns are more plentiful and beloved than be the Bible. Even priests brandish outlandish cannons here. White marble, chocolate city, center of orgies of centaurs and nuns, bulls and bitches snuffling and scuffling in bed each midnight. Here, faith is always going down grade, for evil can't be rinsed away, unlike watercolors. Here, cannibalism is synonymous with candor. Here, the murders of niggers just vanish. I see my bushman's blood gush red into black type, my caste, C-A-S-T, C-A-S-T, bracket E, close bracket, my ruthless die. My problem is I recall the phantom slaves that touch of smoke upon the Potomac, that historians paper over with guilt my brittle treble, troubles the resonant glaze of ink. But you need dark yellow tequila and a brazen brass trumpet to wipe away piss yellow journalism. Civilization is exacting, but America is only merely play acting at civility. Thank you. This is Richard Preston arriving in Halifax, 1816. Halifax, this Venetian backwater shrinks from the alfresco sea openness. An inferno of rum and opium, it yields only bones of light, broken on pebbles, tangled in seaweed, mangled in breakers. White gulls screech, gray ruin over the foam-scourged beach, the waste. Provincial is Halifax and its Baptist mere backwash, hogwash of London's ocean-striding believers. Each colony is the empire's cradle and grave. Shakespeare fathers, Shakespeare the slave. Shakespeare fathers, Shakespeare the slave. Flinching at sight of Africans darkening their walnut or cedar pews. Our local blanching Baptists dangle before us a Dante Christ, sallow, yellow, sickly, and Rembrandt somber shadow. This sun-blackened Jesus dies like Beowulf butchered Grendel. These Jimmy Crack Corn and I don't care nihilists, negrophobes, and antichrist want no truck with black refugee idealists, yet reject any Negro nursed up church, and so yell involuntarily convoluted objections. They prefer us pickaninnying Caucasian cotton to look away, look away, look away to bullwhip land somewhere over a red, white, and blue star-spangled rainbow, but not to look to X, not to exercise the hard muscle of faith. They want to corner off blackness, hit it off, rope it in, nail it down, shut it up, white it out. In Nova Scotia, theology furnishes theater. Here, then, not only is every Black, if Nova Scotian, an American, he or she constitutes by birth the Devil's Party. Hence, the Haligonian Baptist icy in blood, sulphurous in heart, eager to play white-faced gods in noir robes, carp at us more than they harp. Sometimes silver-tongued, brown-nosing blackguards. Sometimes silver-tongued, brown-nosing blackguards, and you are imagining Donald Trump. But often But often, a green-eyed, yellow-bellied, purple-faced raging, they don a pristine, black-framed whiteness claim, Adamo ad Eva per datero, il paradiso per aver voluto sapere troppo, which means Adam and Eve lost paradise because they wanted to know too much. They pour cold water on our baptisms, try to stifle our worship because we are not eunuchs or anus-souled believers. And our black art services, a tambourine bleats like a heart. Pass me not starts up, mournful trumpets and brash trombones promise a heaven that's nigh, as if we're on the brink, ebony us of cerulean blue, and why not? Against our epoch of erasure, we raise a song. I was really struck by Kim Dhillon's art criticism, and one of the things about this book that happened accidentally, but then became something I always wanted to do and started to do consistently, was to make sure I never wrote anything in this book that was written in Toronto. Nothing. So it's also a version of travel writing, in that everything got written somewhere else outside Toronto. And between March 2011 and March 2020, those 9 years before the pandemic struck and the first shutdown, Friday, March 13th, 2020, I left Canada every single month for 9 years, every single month, mainly because I couldn't stand Stephen Harper. But sometimes it just meant driving down to Niagara Falls, New York, and walk across the bridge. A very cheap way to exit Canada. And coming back, say, you got anything to declare? I said, yeah, I got a poem. I can declare the poem. Because I would leave Canada in part so I could write something that was away from the country. Anyway, so this comes back, started to mention Kim Dhillon's wonderful project. And so I imagine Reverend Preston in London viewing depictions of the crucifixion in the National Gallery. So I try to think what he might have thought looking at those paintings. So it's a persona poem. So they're okay. Even if they're not supposed to be okay, they're okay. On viewing depictions of the crucifixion in the National Gallery, what no artist ever gets right is the inevitable plum color of the prickles and bruises X's briery halo inflicts, nor do they mix a tint suitable for God's uninhabitable complexion, while the morose vagabond, the too mortal divine monarch, the king of the Jews, is being systematically martyred spike by spike and spear by spear. Intriguingly, not one artist balks at depicting the grisly butchery, for God looks best in Gothic circumstances, the giallo yellow shtick, the film noir Paul, and the macabre is synonymous with medieval evils, inquisitional tortures, and massacres. Anyway, the rent or vent in X's hide features a hellish hemorrhage, no matter how one angles it, as either colorist or pictorialist. Apparently, English artists believe that all or any crucifixion depiction requires is a crucifix and a peasant slurping ale. Then again, the sublunary Brit kings influence portraitists badly, for each one's a carny talent, each bids a harem of rats from Henry VIII to Edward VIII, and are skillful at achieving divorce via beheading the discard. Ultimately, an art gallery satisfies parasites only, the leeching appetites of blood-sucking eyes, those visions that gorge on gore, the ruddy flood that flushes, that permeates and saturates. But excess purity in our world is as frail as rainwater sluicing down a gutter en route to a sewer. All these canvases I canvas, the parading of a dead populace, each corpsed personage, each personable cadaver, and so a spectacle of specters, subjects of miserable slaughter until the subjugated and Easter corrupted bloody April X is overkill, suiting our cannibal compassion for raw meat. Now, here's the crucifixion set amid unexpected English scenery, a village feast on complacent greenery, and yet a completely chilling canvas to spy our lad, bolted to a cross lanced between the ribs while glib onlookers dance. It's a story best drowned, lost in booze, as occurred after the Last Supper. Yeah. As I mentioned, part of the project, oh, I've got to read this. I'm sorry, I got to read this. How am I doing?
You can say for a couple more. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Letter to the Africadian Baptist Messiah. Oh, no, don't read that. Okay. Letter to the Africadian Baptist Messiah. Tons upon tons of cold afflict us here, positive Nova Scotians of negative character. This province is nothing but a royal brothel, bad, deficient, proves each female. The best of our lot are just mesmerizing scum, dubbing this nauseating swamp Elysium. Incest thrives here twixt cradle and gallows in white Genesis. Stallions stab into sows. Agony of desire compels us to sin. Pleasure plies its ominous religion. Hazy cheer is ours. Redemption is complex. Our mission is salvation via intermissions of sex. Les putains de merde, oh nature généreuse. These unprecedented parasites leak glaucous mucus. They live by joining in unhygienic contests. Shit-soused, each priest imputes a putrid antichrist. Their love has two faces, jouissance and intense sorrow. They stroll bow-legged from seance to seance. Not bland or blind or blonde, thou art blunt black being from beyond. To forestall fault-finding fires and flood, you accept agony upon the rood. Smoke-laureled heads and blood-lacquered hands prefer you dead as ghostly phosphorescence. The clergy are treasonous, as they are always. Their sermons distill poison they deem delicious. Each preacher is as sincere as a courtesan. Their facades mirror the Sphinx insolence. Prophet frauds, those library libertines, compose a codex gigas to damn all gullible Negroes, entrusted with diamonds but encrusted with blood. Governors erect, rood after rood. In Golgotha, you meet antique assassins, daggers, the questioning eyeballs of dissatisfied beggars. Damnable priests, bankers clad in sober black, cold soldiers whose whips burn up your turned back, a provisional deluge of curses, a draught of blood, a blessing of vinegar till sorrow trickles into mud, as violent as vultures gnawing a corpse, whips prey upon thee, so thy spine warps. Thy fine, dark face, unconquerable king, is laced with spittle during thy ruddy scourging. The epitome of pity and so pitiable, thou art hogtied, hornswoggled, like any criminal. A glut of light and autumn topper and mauve flares Halloween harvest, brightens Christmas stove. Dying is always in December, reviving is reserved for Easter. Should it return too early, it will be too late. Love loves none save those who love hate. Be that unexpected Christian, never hostage to religion, but hostile to bavardage. Truth is torment, truth is torment, truth is torture, never dormant. Set hires of fire on every side, scourge us of lust, purge us of pride. Hew from scripture bright pearls of verse, new stars to light the Ethiop universe. From time to time, lead poets back to poetry. Let each scribe torch the Bastille in the library. Damnable poets speak volumes and say nothing. The revelations disperse in gaseous vomiting. The disciple of negligent hand, careless of a pure style, serves malicious palaces. The true poets press ink from crushed wasps' nests. Books father books, knowledge is promiscuous. The trumpet of poetry sounds ever hideous. Thus, if honest preaching sounds insidious, I have coffee and cocaine, my solitary pension. Suppose it's how I oppose decomposition. I eat pastries, drink pasty, and parley with all. Heretical history, Salmagundi, intellectual. My cafe face looms bold from the crowd when brittle light, grimy rhyme is the little that's allowed. My scorpion of black ink stings the sugar page. My verse is vinegar or wine of bitter vintage, but art is cruel and eternity is uninhabitable. And I know I should be finishing up.
Yes, I have one more.
Okay, hey, Zoe, thank you so very, very much. And I'm going to find something decent to end with, I hope, and not too political or anything like that. And well, I got to say, as you probably heard a little bit anyway, in this project, while I do try to give real force and credit to the precepts of believers, I'm also very interested in those who don't bother with it all, and in fact run the other way. And so amongst the poems that talk about Father Preston and his ministry, I also have pieces that are very, very, very secular. Okay? Yeah, just like very, 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 very secular. From folks who just basically said a pox on all of it all. I have no interest in any of that stuff. And as I say, went the other way completely. And so come up with language that makes that very clear. And as I continue to look for a piece that will make that very clear. Well, all right. Let's just look at Kishy Fells. No, I can't, because Kishy Fells is like too, she's just too much. Okay, this is it's short actually and very, very simple. Furthermore, by Kishy Fells. Hypocrisy is all fuss, cosmetics, but corrosive, corroding. Like a gazelle leaping out a snare is he who flees a false amigo. Like a clay pot that splits in the kiln's heat, so does a gossiper fail to produce truth. The sinner's flesh is like iron untreated by eel oil. It decays, it rots, it rusts, it breaks down. Its corrupted atoms canker its surface and fault the whole. Rust makes iron ironically. And so did my ancestors' dreams of liberty go awry, mirroring haughty steel with tufts of rust. Mirroring haughty steel with tufts of rust. I really wish I could go on and read that truly raunchy stuff.